Hello, these are two Yamaha grand pianos, a G2 here and a G3 in the background there. This one's 1978, 1976, similar age, one slightly longer than the other, and I've been offered them to see if we want them to take into stock. So let's have a look at them both and compare them. First of all, I'm moving over to this area here where you can see on the back there, let's zero in on it, a sign that this piano has been imported from Japan as a second-hand item. This is the tuning card that this is the holder for the tuning card. In Japan they have a tuning card on the side of all the grands there. Sometimes these have been taken off so you can't tell, but we're going to look under the piano as well. And under the piano we find this plaque, exclusive. This is a Japanese second-hand piano trade plaque that you see on a lot of them, not on all of them certainly, but that's verification that it was sold to the UK, so it's been shipped over as a second-hand item. And likewise the G3, this is inside the G3, you see the tuning card holder there, and again the plaque inside there. So they've both been a second-hand item to Japan. Very common, not sure what percentage, but a huge percentage of pianos in the UK, second-hand Japanese Yamahas, uprights and grands, were imported as second-hand items from Japan. Now, the fact that it's an imported second-hand piano from Japan doesn't matter from my experience at all. We want to test the tuning pins. Could be just as good as one that was sold in the UK or in Europe. First of all, this one has, you see, look at the string, this is the G2, slightly on the rusty side, but that's not a problem for us we just have to clean that. The rust doesn't affect the tone, and listening to the tone of this G2, it's very, very good, very rich. So I'm warming to this piano already, and it feels good, though the touch is usually something we can regulate anyway. And right to the top, nice strong sound. When I'm testing a piano, I usually test this mid-range first, especially if I've got a lot of pianos to test at once. Does it sing? Does it sing in the tenor? Good break point and solid bass. So yeah, that sounds very promising. Over to the 1976 G3, and again the tuning pins are tight right the way through. Sometimes they do go loose. It's important to check. I'd say the huge variety of second-hand pianos bought in from Japan, and listening to the tone in the middle first, and I'll straight away, immediately I can feel something isn't right there. I mean, it's got an underlying tone that's okay, but I suspect it's the hammers, and here it's a bit shallow. Breakpoint's reasonable, so the underlying tone is okay, although a bit shallow around here. Now the G3 has very discoloured fronts on the piano. That's very, very common with second-hand Yamahas from Japan. It's very discoloured. They need replacing really. Now that's also an indicator very often that it's been stored a bit damp, and that would be in a dampish place. That might account for the slightly weak sound there, though I don't want to criticise it before I've really examined it properly. It's got potential to the top, but the hammers are very weak round here. So taking the G3 apart, sure enough there's a problem with these hammers. They've been refaced and there's not much hammer left. We'll compare it with the hammer on the G2. And here's the same hammer on the G2. It's not been touched at all. As original and just sounding beautiful like it should do. Plenty of hard felt there, can be voiced. It doesn't need voicing, it's not quite right yet. You can see the indentation. That represents a reasonable amount of playing, but considering this in 1978, it's not a huge amount of playing for that period of time, and the regulation is still good. Someone may have regulated it since then, but all the hammers, the springs are working well, so that's very encouraging. And going back to the G3, you see how flat the hammer. Compare it with how much hammer we had on the other one. This has been reshaped. There's too much hammer hitting the string still. When you reshape, you want to try and get a point, but there's not really been enough felt to do this, and it's so soft as well. So they need changing, there's no doubt about that. You've seen videos, hopefully, of older pianos that we've done. It's very hard to restore Yamahas, unfortunately. They're on this almost like self-tapping screw system here. it's possible. I think if you're a restorer, you're listening to this, you'll say, I've done some hammers on Yamahas. Yes, but it is much more difficult than a traditional piano. They're not made to restore in the same way. Now, let's try and be positive about this. That's quite flat as well. At least the hinges here are tight. So you could replace these hammers and get a reasonable sound out of them afterwards. But there's also a bit of a question about the tone in the middle and also the key fronts. I would think that, I certainly don't want to risk this, I can't take this piano on. There's not enough profit margin on a Yamaha like this to be able to do it, and if there's a question mark at the end of the day, then it's definitely a no. It's going back to the G2 again, which I've already decided it's a piano worth taking on. Very nice piano, hard hammers, and they're in the indentation there, so you can reface, but if you do reface, gingerly, because it already sounds good, not necessarily taking all three lines out, being very thoughtful about it, a bit of voicing, not too much, this really sounds good already, so a little bit of fine voicing. Wouldn't mind voicing on a quarter pedal, but that would be a great thing to do. So, and again, the regulation, let's have a look at the regulation. Hammer's going up, so that's good. That means the springs are good. There's a bit of set off to do, I notice. It's not quite setting off as late as it should, but basically you don't have to do any major work on this. So that's an assessment with two Yamahas to decide whether we want to take them into stock, and this is the G2, which I'm already very fond of. You get a good Yamaha and you've got a wonderful piano. Especially this age of Yamaha. 70s is, both for uprights and grands, a lovely era. The beautiful tone throughout, very even, very warm. And it's going to be a great piano to take into stock. This is the G3, and it's a strange thing because when the hammers are bad, it feels like the touch is bad. In fact, the regulation on the touch isn't that bad, but it's the fact that the hammers are very soft and really need to be changed. Basically, up here they're very, very thin indeed. It's very thin tone. So there's nothing left in them. And the underlying tone is there, but we just have to change the hammers, and it's not something that I'll be prepared to do, especially as a slight question mark as to whether it's got damp in storage, usually in Japan. If you go to Japan, you'll find there's all sorts of pianos being exported. There's very, very good piano dealers there, and then there's some in sheds in the back garden, and those are the ones that tend to get damp. So, got potential, but just doesn't sing. We'll go back to the other one to see if you can tell the difference. I'll try around here. Play something similar on the other one, and the tenor. So let's try the G2 and compare it. Here's the G2. Such a full sound in comparison. And really sings, and it's a delightful tone here. When you get a good Yamaha, you've got an excellent piano. Thank you very much for listening.